really quick for Shane's sake, because Shane may have to drop off at 4:30 whenever his bishop shows up because he's planning a pool party.
I'm not in trouble. I'm in charge of the pool party for the ward on August 20th with my wife. That's my job right now as a member of the ward. So
Yeah,
he's
and
coming
hey,
over here to just make sure that we got this thing dialed in.
just so you guys know, we get some of our fans that say, that compare us to Ward Radio, and we really love Ward Radio, and look up to them, and so that's always a compliment to us. Let's just say that Shane puts on a better pool party than Kwaku. Okay. Now, people might be more appropriately and modestly dressed than Kwaku's pool parties, but Shane puts on an incredible pool party, hence why he's got the calling. He's janitor and he's pool party, if that tells you anything about Shane's capabilities. Everybody.
That's right.
Okay, so Shane wanted to talk about one of the things that he read in looking you up online about Salt Lake City being potentially destroyed or whatever. Shane, take it over.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of people that are aware of the Visions of Glory book. I'm sure, Mike, you've heard of the Visions of Glory book. But there's a lot of prophecy about destruction of Salt Lake City. And I had read somewhere that you had felt the Lord told you that you had to let some people know that is coming. Can you speak to any of that?
I can speak to what I saw, how that went down. I actually, it was another one of those cases where the guy standing next to me is my father, and I'm out at the point of the mountain. And I was looking to the north. And as I'm looking, the sun is coming up over on my right, above the mountains there. I, at the time, assumed that it's the Wasatch Front. I still assume that. But it was, I'm going to guess, about 10 o'clock in the morning. And as I'm looking over the valley, I can't see one single thing standing. Nothing. There is zero still standing. No buildings, no freeways, no temples, no nothing. It was all leveled. And it reminded me of pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where you see all this twisted metal and cement, and it's piled up here and there. And, you can't even tell what was in that spot other than it's a bunch of cement. And I'm looking over all of this. I see no smoke, and I see absolutely no people. There's nobody there. And I'm looking, I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And my father says to me at the time, this is the 10th of October. And I said, what year? He says, we're not going to tell you that because we don't want you anticipating what's going to happen. But you will stand here on the 10th of October and look over that valley and see this view that you're seeing right now. And so that's kind of how that went down. You okay? Anyway, and so
Hey,
that,
Mike, I'm in Davis. I'm in Davis County. Did you see Davis County? Are we okay?
You know what? I have no idea what's going to happen up there, but you're not that far away, so it could be pretty bad. But it was interesting to me because every time October comes around, and I kind of go, "Is this going to be the year?" But this could have been 2 or 3 months after it happened that I was finally there on that spot looking out. But I have had some other dreams like this or visions that absolutely came true right to the very last degree, and we probably shouldn't get into that now because we're onto the book. But no, I did see that, and that was.
What did you interpret? Like, what was your understanding of why there weren't any people? Like, is this like a rapture type thing?
No, and no smoke either. No, it was like something had devastated this. I could not tell whether it had been gigantic earthquakes or, a comet or nuclear, or I couldn't tell because everything was just down. It was all on the ground, and it surprised me because I didn't feel this mourning feeling either, like, oh my gosh, think of all the dead and all that. I didn't have any of that with it either. So it was kind of different. But
if there was no smoke, if there was no smoke, apologize. Maybe this what you were seeing this, far after the time where people were
Exactly.
removed or they fled or something like that.
Or they did, yeah, and they just decided not to come back. There wasn't anything for them to come
Yeah,
back.
exactly.
But it
Interesting.
was it was a mess. The whole area. It's like
Wow.
when you look down where the prison used to be, and you look down across there. I couldn't even tell where the prison was because it was all leveled. I
Shane, Shane,
I
does that break
Mike,
your heart?
Mike, I lived in that prison for 5 years.
oh, really, wow, lucky you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now
I
Mike's
actually
now Mike's not going to come back on the show, Shane. Come
yeah,
on.
no. Yeah, yeah. I was the first person to ever baptize someone in the Jordan River Temple. Okay, now that's really aging me. Okay, but I looked specifically to see that, and I couldn't see it. Everything was on the ground. I could not see the Jordan.
Okay. Well, one
Okay,
thing that
I'm going to go ahead, and I want this to keep going. I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself because my bishop's going to be here any minute. But this is so interesting. I'm excited to rewatch this. But Mike, thanks again for
No
coming on
problem.
again. I want to continue to do this. In fact, the next time I want to do this, I want to take you to lunch or something. So we'll drive up there and we'll take you to
Shane,
lunch.
Shane, before you go, I'm going to put a teaser out there so people can be excited. Mike, one of the next videos that we're going to do,
Dream
we
mind.
want to talk about the Salem Dream Mine. So, Shane, you
I'm
can leave
probably
on that note.
one of the only people that has been clear to the very end inside the mine.
Gee,
Right,
don't say
3,400
anything more.
feet. 3,400
We're going to
feet.
mute you.
Bye, guys. Thanks,
See ya.
Mike.
Okay. So, David, I wonder if it would be best to boot him for visual sake. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I've been feeling the itch that I need to share this. There's this went out in an email, so I'm not sharing anything that's not public information. But Chief Mitiga had a dream, and he even mentions a time frame, and he says that he saw the Wasatch Front flattened, and like the description that he gives on it is like when I read, I'm like, I need to get out of here. And he basically called the members to prepare to get ready to head back west because things are going to be flattened. And I was like, ah.
Yeah, along
So
with that, it's interesting you'd say that. During this time of about December, when I was working with Jesus, I had people come into my office who had also had dreams and visions of the destruction along the West Front. Probably, oh, I'd say 30 of them. And some of these guys were like food storage salespeople, and they're like, yeah, this has been great for business, because people are having these experiences. But one thing that they said was that they saw a lot of water. Water came in, but it wasn't for very long. It filled up and then went back down. And I don't know if your Menonhawk guys saw any of that or
uh,
any of that.
I stopped short. Of saying that because I don't want to freak people out, but that is exactly what he said.
Yeah.
And yeah, like even
What?
he instead of people saying that it like came from the Great Salt Lake and floods Utah County, which a lot of people have seen that in their dreams. He said that like the crust of the earth like broke up and waters like rushed up from underneath it.
Most
I
people don't
mean,
realize there's a river, underground river that runs from up in Canada all the way down underneath the Wasatch Front, and it splits just about in the Utah Idaho border area, and part of that goes over into Nevada, and the other part comes along the Wasatch Front. And I believe that was actually what fed Lake Bonneville when Lake Bonneville was here, because it's fresh water and they can actually drill down into it if they want to, but it's fairly deep. It's about, I think it's 2,300 feet down to it. So you got a pretty deep well if you do that. But that water, and what these people saw, the same thing. It was coming up out of the ground. The water was coming up and filling the valley
It
out of the
sounds
ground.
like
It's kind of like,
Noah's days,
yeah, you're
like
backing
the
up
days of Noah.
but
hey, David, David, just so you know, you're in Orem. That is like no bueno, dude. That is under like 30, 40 feet of water from what I've heard in these other dreams. Now, I'm
I
not
don't know if
kidding you,
I'll be here
dude.
very long.
But
Hey,
here's the
you got about 7 years.
no, David's going to get well enough along on this path that he just walks on the top of it as
All
as it
right.
raises. Okay, there you go.
Come and get me, David. Come and get me. Okay, so wow, that I didn't expect to have that deep of a convo about that. Shane wanted to bring that up. And yeah, I'm looking at property in Costa Rica in the mountains at about, like 10,000 feet high in case there's like a pole shift. We're going to do a video in the future about a
Oh,
pole shift because we've had
yeah.
multiple pole shifts, and each time they've happened, there's been catastrophic worldwide floods, just like the
Oh yeah.
craziest thing you've ever seen.
Well,
And the
picture
safest place to
picture
be on a worldwide flood. Sorry, the safest place to be on a worldwide flood is near the equator at the highest part of land. And so Costa Rica is looking bueno to me right now.
well, when you think about it, and the Earth is spinning, and at the equator, see the water is actually deeper there because it's centrifugal force that holds it out. Well, you shift the crust underneath that water is going to displace itself back to where it feels an equilibrium in the middle of the planet. And so, yeah, huge. I mean, we're talking massive flooding. And a lot of people have seen that. A lot of
Great.
people.
Let's talk about something positive here.
Yeah,
My goodness. Okay, so back to the book, everybody. And hey, Mike, we're going to continue for another 25 minutes or so. Is that okay?
that's fine. That will work.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Alrighty. So next is a very interesting book, which I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on it because I haven't got into it. I've held this one and skipped it because I'm hoping it's good, and I didn't want to be let down. It's The Brother of Jared, and Moroni does the introduction on it, and he talks a little bit about the stones that he got, and tell us what's in this. What's the meat of this?
Well, it's a brother Jared's story, basically. Let me tell you where I got it. They can read it and judge it for themselves. But um, I had received some of these other things. When I say other things, other records, and I was coming down Party's Canyon, and I'm talking to the Lord, and I said, Lord, if there's any more of this out there, I want it. And I'm immediately, he says, go over and see Ogden Kraut. I'm like, Ogden and I don't get along really well. Okay. Well, we didn't at that time. Are you familiar with Ogden Kraut and his son, Kevin? And okay.
I've read about anything I can find that he has either put out or published. I love his thought process. Don't agree with everything, but love it.
No, he's really good that way. You know, he has a very good mind for detail and seeing things. But we just, I have a tendency to go more by the feeling side of things instead of being told by somebody else's record. So we didn't really get along too well. However, I used him as a resource, and he used me as a resource, and so we saw each other, and I knew him well enough that I just went over to his little print shop in Murray and knocked on the door and went in, and he said, I said, you know what? You know, we could make an awful lot of money, Ogden, if we could get the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon. He goes, oh, I have this guy who brought in some stuff. And he said, it's so bad. And I said, really? Can I look at it? Oh, yeah. It took him about 10 minutes to find this. He was going digging through all his files and everything. And finally, he pulls out this thing that's the brother of Jared. And I said, where did you get this? And he said, oh, a guy by the name of Chris Nemelka gave it to me. And I said, well, where did he get it? And he said, well, he used to work for the church in the archives, and he took it out of the church archives. And so I thought, whoa, that's pretty interesting. You know?
What?
Yeah. Hey, the story gets even better, so just keep listening. Anyway, so I take it, and I'm reading it, and I'm going, wow, this is good stuff. You know, I'm enjoying all the information that's here. So I actually give Nemelka a phone call. I find his phone number, and I give him a phone call. And I said, hey, where did you get this? Well, I used to work for the church, and I was working in the archives division. And he was actually a security type guard. And I said, well, So he says, well, how did you get it? And he goes, well, I stole it. I'm like,
Whoa.
you took it out of the church archives, you stole it. And he said, yeah, that's what I did. Okay. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty interesting story. So, and this is going to get a little bit convoluted here for a second, but you'll get, I'll try and draw it all back together. So I take the book, and it's probably, oh gosh, it's got to be 6 months later. Um, I have some people asking me about it and talking to me about it. So I thought, well, I don't have all the information on what's happened with this, where this brother Jared came from. So I'm gonna get a hold of Nemelka again. This time, he's living like in California. So I give him a phone call, and he completely denies everything. Everything. I never took anything. I made all that up. It was just a made up thing. I just wrote it down, and I made it up. And he went down this completely different road than he had told me before, And I'm like, why would you do that? That seems kind of hokey. But that's what he told me. So from then on, it was like, I don't know if I can deal with this guy because I can't take this kind of wishy-washy back and forth. And it was a direct lie. Okay, so bless his heart. I don't know why he would do that, but that's where it went.
Do you
So,
do you think he got pressure from family or the church or lawyers or anything like that?
would you like to hear the rest of the story? Because
Oh, I was
about
hoping there was more. I was hoping there was more.
there is more. There is more to that. That particular one, and in fact, it's interesting that you would mention that one. Okay, so I have an experience. There's a fellow by the name of Keith who is kind of working with me on some of this stuff, and we'd gotten all the sacred scripture book out, and he'd help me with it as far as money wise. We'd go do some little jobs, construction jobs, and then we'd be able to get the more books and everything. And one day we're sitting in my office in the kind of little bookstore, and he says to me, he says, have you been thinking that this has got to go out on a more mass basis? And I said, yeah, I've really been thinking that we need to get a copy of this out to all the general authorities and the stake presidents and bishops along the Wasatch Front. And he goes, that's exactly what I felt. And so I go back and I inquire in this, and what I get is, go ahead with your feelings. Go do what you feel to do inside, and we will provide the way for it to happen. Okay, so, well, that costs a lot of money to go do something like that. So I didn't have the funds at the time, and I'm sitting in my office. This is like 10 days later, okay, after we'd had this conversation. Keith and I'd had this conversation. It's about 10 days later, and a guy walks into my office. He had never been in my office before. I'd never seen him in my office. And he walks in and he's holding it looks like a lunch sack in his hand. It's a paper bag. And as soon as I look at the sack, the hair on my arms just starts standing up. It's like, that's for you, And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You got a bomb in there, I'm thinking, what's going on here? And he walks over to my desk and he hands it towards me and sets it on the desk, and he says, I don't know what project you're working on, but I've been directed to bring this to you, and this is to pay for it. And so I said, okay. And without even opening it, he turned around and walked out the door. Never saw him again in my office. In fact, I've never seen the guy again in my office at all. So I open up this bag and I look inside, and there's $6,000 in cash in this bag. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. So I'm telling Keith, I says, hey, Keith, guess what I got? And he goes, oh my gosh, I'm getting the feeling just looking at that bag. I know what this is for, So anyway, over the next about 2 weeks, we started getting together enough copies that we could do this. We didn't know how many people we send this out to. Out of the clear blue again, a guy walks into my office and he says, I found this book that I think might be helpful to you guys. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah. He says, I was a clerk in my ward, and we have this book, and it was like a phone book, and it had listed in it all of the bishops and stake presidents, general authorities, and their phone numbers and everything for the whole world. This thing is like,
wow,
an inch thick. And so it's like, just like the old phone books. And he says, I don't know what you can do with it, but I think it might be handy to you. And I'm like, are you kidding? So we had a couple of ladies that said, hey, we'd like to help out on this project, that you're doing. And we said, yeah, we're trying to make stickers up and put them on envelopes and send this off to all these people along the Wasatch Front. We ended up sending out 1,700 sacred scripture books to everybody along every bishop and stake president and general authority along the Wasatch Front. And
Wow.
one night we had a group of probably 15 people come over and we stuffed envelopes, um, but it covered our expenses on the thing completely, and it was amazing. I mean, this stuff like this, just why would that happen? And all it was a witness. Now, what was really interesting though is the stories that I got afterwards. After this all went out, because I had our phone number on it. And I get these calls from people, and they'd say, hey, I was over at my father-in-law's house and I found this book on the wall in his library. And I think, yeah, is your father-in-law a bishop? And yeah, he's a bishop in such and such ward. And then he'd say, can you tell me where this book came from? Or I said, I can tell you how your father-in-law got it. And so we go through this story, and this happened a dozen times during that time when people would tell me, oh, I found this. Yeah, I found this in the trash can. So I thought, oh, okay. So that was pretty
How many bishops or stake presidents got back to you guys
I only had probably 3 out of all of that.
out of 1,700?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, there was about 3 of them.
How did that make you feel?
Okay, actually, you know, um, when you're in a situation where you're locked into this certain space, sometimes it's really, really hard for them to get out of it. And I'm not here to criticize them or anything else. And I just recognize that they're where they are, and I'm grateful that I'm where I am.
It
But
truly
yeah,
sounds like a story I've read in the Book of Mormon somewhere.
yeah.
Which one?
I don't know. A guy that has a first name of A, uh, I at the end. Yeah.
I actually don't know what you're talking about. I don't know if it's because
Like
I'm thinking about
Abinadi.
something else, but
Come
you've
on,
lost me.
I don't need
Abinadi.
I don't need to be burned at the stake. Thank you very much.
Oh,
So,
Abinadi. Okay.
Yeah, well, I was
Um,
trying to, not say it.
oh,
But
well, for the slow people out there that weren't following, now we all know it's Abinadi. Okay, I understand now, Dave. So let's talk really quick about Nemelka, and put that one to bed, because there's a lot of people that do not like him. There's a video on YouTube where he says something like he made it up or something. It's like a 36-second clip, and I wish I could see the whole context. We don't even know what he's saying that he made up.
right.
But interesting. I didn't know that he had told you the same thing. Do you
I,
know if he ever did get pressure?
well, he would, okay, go on with the story on the, okay. So 2 weeks after this comes out, I get a phone call, and it's from a guy by the name of Larry Dahl. He's a professor at BYU. And unbeknownst to me at the same time on the phone is uh, McConkey. I'm trying to remember his first name. It's not coming to me. It might have been Oscar. Anyway, he too was a religion professor at BYU, and they call me on the phone and they say, Mike, I've got in my hands this book called Sacred Scripture. I said, yeah. And he says, are you willing to talk about it? And I said, yeah, yeah. And I said, I'm fine with, yeah, what do you want to know? And so we went through just like you're going through right now and talked about every single book and where it came from. And I told him the Chris Nemelka story. And I told him, I don't really know if this guy's really up and up because of, what he said to me and that sort of thing. So then a couple of weeks later, one of the guys that I had worked with, his an extremely good friend of mine, his wife was looking through a sacred scripture book that he had at home, and she took it to the bishop, and the bishop said, "Oh, I just received a paper on this from the church," and I went, oh, this is going to be interesting. And she shared that with her son, who brought that paper into me. And it talked about where the different books came from, and how I had received them. One of this was the brother of Jared. And in that, it said, Chris Milka was they gave me a lot of information I didn't have. They said Chris Milka was a security guard. He was fired over theft from the church and excommunicated from the church. Then only a week later, they sent out another one that said all the same stuff except for the excommunication. I think they crossed a line there that they were not supposed to. And so they backed away
So
from
the church themselves confirmed that he worked there and that he stole something.
Exactly. Yep, that's what they said.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, they had it was like a 13-page little report that just said, here's where these things come from, and here's how we think you ought to handle this when somebody brings it in.
Hey guys, if you have a second, be sure to share this episode to your friends and family on social media, whether that's Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Whenever you share this, it actually helps us to grow and to build Zion. So thank you to all those that have already been doing that, and thank you for those that are doing that now.
First off, I'm super impressed that the church is doing that. I think that's cool. I've never had a dad or myself been in the bishopric. I didn't know that they gave like info, like intel reports. That's pretty cool to know. Okay, well that's good. That I think that helps me with the Nemelka thing. And wow, now going back to the fact that there's these granite archives, plus there's the downtown building that's entire, archives. There's so much stuff in there that we don't know, and I believe just like the Vatican has all of these records and archives that maybe they, it's not time to publish, or, some people speculate the Catholic Church sitting on certain things, right? They're I just love thinking about that curiosity of like, what's in those granite vaults? What, do they have other records? Do they have other plates? And to know that there's a story at least that Nemelka saw one of them. He's like, I got to get my hands on this, and got it. So okay, cool. Really quickly before we jump to the next one is what it talks about the brother Jared's life. Does it talk about any of the stuff that's supposedly in the sealed portion that's so glorious that we're going to read it from the rooftops, that stuff?
No, doesn't say anything about that.
Okay.
Not that
So
I'm
I can believe it even more getting into this thing like that. This has taken down a lot of good barriers for me, because I don't think that would be ready yet to be read. It was reserved for a reason, right?
no,
Okay.
hold on. It was only preserved because the people weren't ready for it.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's the reason. That's what I mean. That is the reason, right?
But if you go back and read in Ether, he actually says that those who are ready will receive that information. Now, it may not be the actual sealed portion as per se, this is the book, but it's the information that's contained in there.
How cool would it be to have that dream, to be able to get even just a smidgen of it? Like, and that's, we're basically told that in the Book of Ether that we can have that. Is that correct?
Yeah. What? Yeah. Go out and ask for it. Sure.
That's incredible.
Abraham did. Abraham saw it all. So, so can we.
Wow. Okay. So the days of the last days of admonition. Talk about that one.
That one was just placed on my desk, and I don't know. It's like I came in and it was sitting there, type of thing. Same thing with Seek the Lord. They were both done that way. Did you read both of those, or just one of them? Or
I haven't got to anything else on here yet.
Okay. They're more of a modern day type of thing that is, what would I say? Just admonitions from Christ that somebody received. And it's good stuff. I mean, I really like it. I didn't see anything in there that was controversial towards what we believe, but it is very uplifting, extremely uplifting.
Okay, I'd put that in the category of Stoic texts, right? That
and both of those were the same. So the Seek the Lord and Last Days
Seek the Lord as
Admonition.
well. Okay, then let's talk about the sayings of Jesus. Tell us about that one and where that came.
Yeah, now I believe you can still find that out there, the sayings of Jesus. They were written by Thomas Didymus, the apostle. And when I first got that, the copy that I had received had a name on it. I think I may get this mixed up here, but it's C.C. Charles. Anyway, it was a guy that was a professor at BYU who'd done the translation of it, and he was a little nervous about it, I think, doing his translation. So he actually saw it in the Sacred Scripture book, and he said, "You don't have the rights to do this; it's copyrighted." And I said, "Well, what do? Okay, so where did you get the record that you actually put in? You know, this record that you got that you translated?" And he says, "Oh, well, there's been other people that have done it, and maybe it was C.C. Charles who had done it uh, again." And so I found that particular one and I compared it to the original one that I had done. There was only 3 words changed in the whole text. And so I said, "Look, I'll use his and I'll take your name off of it." And I did that after we did the first publication. So he was no longer in it. But that record has been out there, and it's like a apocryphal record. So that's where it came from. Oops, I can't hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. The books of the generation of Adam. That's the next one.
Okay, I actually received that from Dave Whitmer, not the Dave Whitmer that's the testifier to the Book of Mormon, but one of his later relatives. He was kind of my mentor as I started down this path. And Dave I don't know exactly where he got it. It may have come. He was somewhat tied at one time with the Jeffs group, or the not Jeffs, but the Bryant group of people that were kind of fundamentalist oriented. They weren't polygamist, but they were fundamentalist. And he just brought it to me and said, "I think I need to give you this, and it's something that you'll be able to put in with the things that you're putting together." And so I said, "Okay, I will." And that's where it came from. I don't know how he got it.
Okay. And what does it get into?
Whoops.
Can you hear me okay?
It talks all about Adam and what their civilization. It talks about Adam and what their civilization was like, how they uh, grew and progressed and developed, and that's basically it. It's kind of a history of their righteousness. Um, I didn't find it as uplifting as some of the others.
Okay. So I know there's a bunch of apocryphal books on Adam and Eve. I'm just looking right now. There's the life of Adam and Eve. There's the apocalypse of Adam. There's the book of Adam. There's the testament of Adam. I've gone through those in audio. I found those in this, audio playlist at 2x speed, and they're interesting, right? It's just like, because like you said, it's kind of like lifestyle, and there's just a lot more day-to-day info, and Genesis is so sparse, and it happens, such
Right.
such a long life cycle happens in such a short amount of text. In these apocryphal writings, whether they're directly exactly what happened or not, or just inspired, like very, very cool to see some of the perspectives. So I encourage people to go in and look at those that I just rattled over, those different apocryphal books on Adam and Eve. Okay, so the Ascension of Isaiah, and we just have 2 books left after this. So make sure you remember your top 3, Mike, because we're gonna ask you. Tell us about the Ascension of Isaiah.
Somebody just brought that in and set it on my desk again. Where it all originated, I do not know. It's
You'd
enjoyable.
have their email in today's world. You'd have these guys' email address or Facebook Messenger, because that's how we're getting all of ours:
But
Facebook Messenger, email, Instagram.
they can remain a lot more anonymous, though. So
Yeah.
and I think that was kind of important. Most of these, they did not want to be flamboyant about this at all or get any recognition. They just said, "Hey, I'm directed to give this to you," And that happened a lot. It's part of how that worked. So that's the Ascension of Isaiah. It's quite interesting. It's a whole. I need to go back and reread that because it's been a long time since I've read that one.
Okay, is it just like is it more of like Isaiah type writings, or is it more
Yes.
of like a secondary view of Isaiah and his
Yeah,
life?
it's not as much of a prophetic type thing. If this is going to happen or that's coming, it was different than that. So
Okay, cool. All right.
That's
I'm interested to hear that.
fascinating.
I can't think of any other apocryphal writings on Isaiah. There's a bunch of Jewish midrash stuff, and maybe there are, and people are going to correct me in the comments here. If you know of some, put it in. I'm going to ask ChatGPT as soon as I'm off. Okay, so the next one is Brian Ferry told me this. I think I may be mistaken, but I think he told me this is the one he liked. Levels of light.
oh, yeah, a lady from Idaho said that Moroni had dictated that. Or not Moroni, excuse me, Mormon had dictated that. Moroni's dad, and yeah, it was. It's a little blunt in some areas, but it mostly talks about what the people are going to be like who make the transition from this existence into the future existence of the millennial reign, and that's
Hmm.
really what it talks about. Little critical in a
Wow.
few areas. It's somewhat critical in a couple areas of the current status of things, in the church and that, but nothing that I would say is, damning or anything. It just
That's probably why Brian likes it.
some yeah, somebody's opinion, but it's still really they talk a lot about how the people in the last days and these people that are coming forth now, like your listeners, and that will start to gather together and become of one mind and one heart, and they'll know the needs of each other without having to ask, and they'll go and take care of the needs of one another, because
Wouldn't
that
that be Wouldn't that be neat?
yeah,
Truly.
well, welcome to the millennium,
How do we Mike, how you've had 30 years of wisdom on Dave and I, how, from the time that this has happened, particularly, right? And like, I'm looking out and seeing all the suffering and everything that's happening, and I don't see any groups trying to gather Zion, right? And I'm not even talking just about like the church. Like there's no one doing it. We had a guy on from a fundamentalist group, and they're trying to live a level of the United Order, and I thought that was noble. But why isn't it happening? Isn't it time for it to happen?
I honestly think it'll kind of happen a little bit like it did in the Shulam now, where you won't hardly recognize the people that are on that level. They'll get there when they talk about changing in the twinkling of an eye. They will transition, and a lot of these people are going to be people that aren't part of an organization. They just came down a path that enabled them to so go within that they raise their vibration level to the state where they'll call it ascend. We would call it
Yeah.
translate. And there'll be a lot of those all over the planet. Uh, and if
Well, there's a
people aren't,
lot of there's a lot of people outside of LDS, and I don't think LDS probably believe this, but there's a good chunk in the LDS, me being one of them, that believe it. And that's the teachings of ascended masters that have been on this earth for quite some time. Melchizedek, they claim is one of them, right? And Prince of Salem, and a whole bunch of things. And so that's not that abstract of a concept. It is inside LDS eschatology, right? But
well, are,
it's
are you familiar with Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East?
I'm not, no.
It's a series of 6 books. Absolutely excellent, excellent information. It's a guy named Spalding and a bunch of his associates went to China during the transition from the 1800s to the 1900s, and they were seeking records, kind of like you're doing. And they were picking up, and they found these records. But while they were doing that, they had these people approach them that had these strange abilities. They were able to walk on water and walk through fire and create food and all the things that Jesus did. and they have experiences with Jesus, and it's really good information. Very,
Whoa.
yeah, it was very,
I got new reading. I
yeah.
love it when I get new reading. That's very cool. David, anything here before I go to the next book?
No, thank you. I'm just eager to read these things, and I never learned. You're right, Trevor. I can't say that I didn't believe that out of that book that you read, but it's just that I never heard about it. I didn't know it existed, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay, last but not least, we know the most about this, but pretend that people don't know the backstory of the revelation of John, the unfolded version. You talked about it in the first podcast, but just humor us again with the origin story because it's the coolest. It's the wildest, at least.
Well, there was a guy named Mark Taylor. He worked for Trax Bookstore in Salt Lake, and Trax was kind of the conservative underground bookstore at the time. I walked into his store one day, and he looked over at me, and it was like he was recognizing me, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And he said, I what's your name? And I said, I'm Mike Rigby. And he says, I have something for you. And he pulls out this floppy disk and he says, and this, do you remember they used to have them? They were like 5x5 and flexible. Anyway, you probably
Oh yeah,
weren't born when those.
I remember him. David probably is still old enough to remember floppies.
Yeah, I definitely know floppies.
Okay.
And he hands me this floppy disk and he says, I've been being visited by John the Beloved. And he asked me to put all this together. And so I did. And he said, that you would, in a dream, he told me that you'd be coming by and that I was to give it to you. And so I'm like, okay, it's kind of weird to be in somebody else's dream, and they got it accurate that I was going to be there. And so that's how that came about.
And you're compiling a book. I wonder what the trillions of odds that would be,
Yeah.
And if the same guy, every single person that came up to the cash register, did he have the same conversation? I had a dream about you last night. Are you compiling a book? You're not compiling a book? It's not you.
We should ask Gaz. We should ask Gaz on the odds on that.
What are the odds?
He knew right off the bat. Yeah, it was like he was completely ready to hand that to me when he did. It was
That's
not
cool.
This wasn't by chance or anything. So yeah, it was.
Okay, so then am I correct in the first 4 chapters of going through it? My take of this is like a Joseph Smith translation, expanded version of the Book of Revelation. Does it continue that way throughout?
Kind of, yeah. I probably of all of the records, that one was the least impressive to me as far as impressiveness. Now, some people might get a whole bunch out of it. I've never been a gigantic Revelation studier, so it didn't mean the same to me when I saw it. But at the same
Yeah, it
time,
just seemed to me like how Joseph Smith expanded on different things, and he would add a paragraph here and add something here. He would just add different stuff, and I didn't have the intellectual capacity to like cross reference and see why does it make a difference, right? Because it's to me, I really like the study of going through Joseph Smith's JSTs to see why. Why did he put it in there? What was it that he was clarifying, correcting? And I'd like to do that with this book. We know that John the Revelator has given a book to one other person that has told us in confidence. And so when I heard that John the Revelator has given a book to somebody else, I was like, all right, bet. Tell me that story.
I'm open to believing at that point.
Yeah.
I wish these were still around. I mean, they are around, but in the flesh would make it a little bit easier to be able to go back and chase them down on some of this
Yeah,
stuff.
it's unfortunate how many of these people have passed away already. Absolutely. Okay, well, as we transition here, Mike, we're going to put you on the spot now for your top 3 of these books. What's your favorite? Start with number 3.
Third,
Yep.
I'm going to say probably would be Levels of Light.
All right. Levels of Light comes in the trifecta spot. Number 2.
The Last Days, Admonition.
All right. That's good to hear. Now I want to be admonished.
Seek the,
Okay.
I think seek the Lord would be the next one.
Seek the Lord, first place.
Yeah, if I was to try and describe the value of any of this to people that are listening and what can they get out of it, this whole process is about what Moroni said. You know, seek this Jesus, go find this guy. He's the one who will take you through everything you need to go through in order to get back to your Father in heaven. Um, Actually, it reminds me of a poem. You ready for a poem?
Let's
You
do
guys
it.
Yes,
think a poem?
please.
Chief
I traveled.
Mitiga dropped poems with us.
Did
He
he?
even sings. Do you have any
He
Listen,
songs?
sings too. Mike, will you sing, Mike?
no, but I've done the tongues thing enough times that I could probably do that.
Okay.
So anyway, I traveled down a dreary road and spied a man both wet and cold. I couldn't believe the coat he wore, for it must have been owned by 3 or 4. His shoes were soaked from the sleet that night, and his hair was a stringy, tattered sight. I clenched my fists, my hands were numb, and I vowed I'd leave the drunken bum. He'd probably never appreciate the help I'd give to his fallen state. Moving closer, I picked up my pace and tried to elude his pitiful face. But what if I were in his place, and I was the one with the pitiful face? Had no one said hello to me, I wonder what my fate would be. Had not a hand been sent my way, perhaps I'd be with him this day. My aching heart could take no more, for I knew that life had more in store. Across his face my eyes reached out to calm his troubled mind of doubt. I said, now you can come with me and share in my security, for where I live it's dry and warm, and no one there will do you harm. I clasped his hand and felt the mark that said, I've known you from the start. He smiled at me as I went to my knees and said, fear not, you've done it unto the least of these. You see, today you've passed the test, and now may enter into my rest.
Whoa.
That sounds like a poor wayfaring man.
It
Like that
does.
just reminds me of that.
Yeah, that's
But it's like
That
modern.
that is
that's
beautiful.
actually my favorite song. So I have all 7 verses
Really?
now, but I'm not singing it for you.
That is absolutely beautiful. Mike Rigby, thank you
New
for
church
sharing
hymn.
that. Thank
Nope.
you for sharing that. That is very moving. And when did you memorize that? When did you decide? That's a lot. That's a mouthful.
uh, 92, 91, somewhere back in there.
Do you have a tendency to remember long things like that?
Like the touch of the master's hand. Yeah. Do you remember that poem? Yeah.
Well, how about
You
you? How about you?
know, the touch of
Well, I think I have, but I couldn't summarize it for you right now. So why don't you do that one as well?
okay. 'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. What am I bidding, good folks? He cried. Who'll start the bidding for me? A dollar, and who'll make it two? $2, and who'll make it three? $3 once, $3 twice. Going for three, but no. From far back in the room, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. And wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening the loosened strings, he played a melody pure and sweet, as a caroling angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, in a voice that was quiet and low, said, what am I bid for this old violin? And he held it up with the bow. $1,000, and who'll make it two? 2,000, and who'll make it three? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, going and gone, said he. And the people cheered, but some of them cried, we don't quite understand. What changed its worth? Swift came the reply, the touch of the master's hand. And many a man with life out of tune and battered and scarred with sin is auctioned cheap to the thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He is going once, going twice, going and almost gone. And the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the master's hand.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally remember that. I've seen that too, like a video. That is awesome. Well, that is the perfect tone to lead out on this podcast, Mike. Thank you for sharing both of those.
Powerful.
That was awesome.
Hey.
Before we wrap up, everybody, I wanted to ask, I had an idea, and Mike, we can edit this out if this isn't a good idea and just end there. Okay. I'm telling you.
It's all
But
recorded in heaven, you know, so
exactly. Okay.
about it.
So I've asked you a couple times this, and so I feel like I'm not stepping too far out here. But what do you think about a scenario where we help you through Zion Media publish this thing online and do it for a really, affordable rate, but then also make a mechanism where we can get it as a digital PDF. And if somebody can't afford it, we can get them a code and we'll give it to those people for free. But if you feel moved and you can, and you can do it, but what do you think about a concept similar to that?
Now you're talking about the sacred scripture book. What do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm open to all of that. Sure. Anything that we can get to move it out is fine. Yeah, I don't have any problem.
Cool. Yeah, because getting this in a a PDF version, even for just like a really low cost download, and if people can afford to do it, great. If not, we'll give them a code where they can get it for free.
I actually have it with my publisher, my printer has got this in a PDF. I don't think it's a digital copy anyway. That's how they print it up. And so I can get you whatever you need on that end. So yeah,
all right, we can do. We're very close to launching our Zion Media website, and there's a digital download section that'd be really easy. And then David's got a technology way to get it into audio as well, and we could show you that before we did it, because so many people now they're not readers, but they're listeners, and we like listeners. Okay, Mike, thanks so much for having us on. This is probably going to be broken into 2 different podcasts. But for all of our Zion Media followers and watchers, I hope this gives you more insight into Mike. It definitely did for me. It made me like you even more, Mike. And I didn't think that was going to happen through this. I don't know why, but you've got a lot of depth to you, my man, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing these things. And like Mike had said, he doesn't have any. He's not trying to start a religion. He's trying to share these things, both his personal experiences, these writings, for one purpose: to try to help people come into Christ. And if that isn't the right message, if that isn't the only message, I don't know what is. And so for all of us here at Zion Media, thank you for tuning in. Like and subscribe. For my man Shane Baldwin, David the Lion Douglas, and Mike Rigby, thank you guys for joining, and we will see you guys next time.